Hello, I'm Dr. Brian Ruben, and here is my position on the recent imposition of tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. I am particularly focusing on the response of the Canadian Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Canadian government made a bold but misguided decision. In response to President Donald Trump's new tariff on Canadian goods, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced retaliatory tariffs on American imports. But was this the right move? Today, I'll explain why Canada is making a huge mistake and what the country should have done instead. Let's start with the basic reality. Canada cannot afford a trade war with the United States. More than 75% of Canada's exports go to the US, while only about 15% of US exports go to Canada. This means that if trade relations deteriorate further, Canada will suffer more than the United States. Instead of engaging in a full-scale tariff war, Canada should have taken a more strategic approach, one that protects its economy without unnecessarily escalating tensions. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to impose retaliatory tariff was not a well-thought-out strategy. It was a reactionary move, and here's why it was a mistake. First of all, it hurts Canadians, consumers, and businesses. These tariffs will drive up prices for ordinary Canadians, making everyday goods more expensive. They will also hurt Canadians' businesses that rely on American imports, leading to potential job losses. Second, it fails to leverage Canadian strengths. Instead of negotiating exemptions or working behind the scenes with the US business leaders who oppose Trump's tariffs, Trudeau chose a direct confrontation. This is not how smaller economies successfully manage trade disputes. Thirdly, it ignores how Trump negotiates. President Trump's approach to trade is aggressive, but he respects strengths and strategic thinking. Canada could have focused on negotiating favorable terms rather than escalating tensions. Number 4, it risks long-term damage to the US-Canada relations. A trade war between Canada and the United States benefits no one except America's competitors like China, who would love to see North American economies' unity weakened. What Canada should have done instead should have been to respond effectively. It should have taken a smarter approach. And here's how this could have happened. First, he could have pursued diplomatic negotiations. Instead of retaliating immediately, Canada should have engaged in behind-the-scenes negotiation with Washington to ensure exemptions and compromises. Secondly, Trudeau should have worked with US businesses. Many American industries oppose Trump's tariff. Canada should have allied with them to create internal pressure on the US government to ease restrictions. Thirdly, there could have been strategic trade diversification. Instead of escalating conflict, Canada could have quietly worked on expanding trade with Europe and Asia while keeping its US relationship intact. Number 4, Canada should have taken a targeted, not broad responses. If tariffs were necessary, Canada should have imposed highly targeted tariffs on goods that would create maximum pressure on the US industry, rather than broad measures that also hurts Canada. So what should Canada do right now? Well, it's not too late for Canada to correct this mistake. Trudeau's government must rethink its approach and shift from retaliatory strategy. This means reopening negotiations and working with US industry leaders and ensuring that Canada's economy is protected rather than harmed by unnecessary conflicts. A trade war with the United States is not in Canada's best interest. Now is a time for leadership, not necessarily reactionary politics. While this kind of reaction could seem to project strength, at the end of the day, it will weaken the economy of Canada. There could be many who are clapping for Prime Minister right now. They could see him as standing up to Trump. But you need to fight from a position of strength, not weakness. And by the way, history also gives us an idea into why the Prime Minister's response was not just smart enough. In the 1930s, Canada took a similar approach as the Prime Minister is doing right now. When tariffs were imposed under the Retaliatory Tariff, Canada responded with retaliatory tariffs. The results? The Canadian economy suffered greatly and trade collapsed. The Prime Minister should have taken a lesson from history and not make the same mistakes. As I said earlier, now is the time for leadership, and Canada must now act wisely before the damages become irreversible.